happens?
It's my coffee.
Don't know. Hello, this is podcast number 17 in series 3. A lot of people don't know we've done a load of more podcasts before these, but this is actually series 3. Tell you about how to get the other ones later. Anyway, today's date is Monday the 9th of May.
Yep, and we are in a new location. We have moved 500 metres from our last spot. We're a little bit further over by the dive schools, and it's very peaceful here, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, although we're next to 2 resorts, they don't seem to play any music and there's no thumping noises. The only noise, really, there were some fish just then, but no one will have heard them jumping around the boat, which is lovely.
Yeah, and the odd air compressor.
Yes.
You know, filling up the tanks.
Yes.
Because we're happy to say that both the resorts we're next to actually have guests. They've all just opened, haven't they?
Yes, literally, sort of one after the other. In the last couple of weeks, they've gone from nobody open to at least 3 that we know of. There's one over there that isn't. We did meet someone who owned a resort and he had to close his resort because of the 2-year ban on tourism. But it's great to see that at last people are getting back to work and they're trying to start up again, the tourist business.
It's really good to see.
Yeah.
So just a quick reminder, this is our podcast chat, which is separate from our vlogs. So these podcasts we publish on Thursdays, and we normally talk about last week's vlog, which will have come out on a Sunday. So just before we start this week's subject, next week we are going to be talking about the journey versus the destination.
Oh, that's right. Yes, so we are.
Yeah, so we just wanted to put that out there now. So if any of you have comments, please leave them, if you're watching on YouTube, in the description, in the comments below the video. If you're listening to this on audio, then tweet us at @followtheboat.
Yes, I like this one because you always see these funny little, it's not the destination, it's the journey, and enjoy the journey, and all these little funny little things you see on Instagram and this, that and the other, little platitudes all over the place. And we've all now been told that we have to enjoy the journey, not just about where we're getting.
Oh, she's off. She's off. Come on, get it off your chest.
Well, anyway, I know I'll do that next week. So there is a journey and there is a destination. They're different things. Does one have to be better than the other? And do you have to enjoy one better than the other? Find out. Let's talk about it next week.
Okay. But today we are talking about what, Elizabeth?
Well, episode 301 went out. This is a Monday, so it went out yesterday. It's only been out for a day. We called it something like, I didn't write it down, The Most Beautiful People in the World. And it's all based in Tarakan, Kalimantan, Indonesia. And it's our experiences there, which really amounted to all the people that we met and the interactions we had with the local occupants.
Indonesia and Indonesians are truly wonderful people. And I think also because we've been in lockdown for 2 years and kind of got cabin fever, it's really exciting for us to be coming out to new places and meeting new people, which geographically is quite different from what we've been used to for the last couple of years. So we kind of got inspired by this particular episode. If you haven't seen it, it's not a sailing one. It's discovering the port town of Tarakan, or the island rather of Tarakan, which is off East Kalimantan.
We're often asked what are the best memories we have of living this lifestyle, and of course we've got 16 years of memories at this stage of the game, and also sort of the best moments and the best things about what we do. And whatever situation, it always comes back to people. Hello, I'm Liz.
And I'm Jamie.
Welcome to Follow the Boat, in which we discuss what it's really like to give it all up to live on a boat.
And go travelling around the world. We've been doing it since 2006 and we're still at it.
Each week we talk about our latest YouTube video.
And about boats, sailing, travel or anything else which floats into our heads.
And if you leave a comment we like, we'll give you an answer and a name check. Peace and fair winds.
We went ashore for a sundowner. I met one of the new divers here who's come over for a couple of days, Matt, who lives in Jakarta, actually, American. And he asked us, what are the highlights?
Yeah.
And we both immediately said the people.
Yeah, we have met some extraordinary people and heard some extraordinary stories over the years in lots of different countries. So yes, people are right up there, and that's what 301 is all about. I loved watching that episode after you'd finished editing it. I'll tell you why. It's because at the moment I'm finding life quite grey and down. You know, when it comes to social media, media generally, the news, everything is so appalling at the moment in the world. If you just thought the world was what you read and saw and heard, I think you would give up.
Yep.
Because it's terribly depressing. In fact, I've taken to not, watching so much of that these days. But that 20 minutes that you put together is of nothing but smiling people. Not giggling, stupid people, but smiling, welcoming people. And it's human-to-human contact, and it really, absolutely puts your faith back in humanity, I think.
Yeah, it was a real tonic for us as well. Yeah. If you've been following our escapades going down that east coast of Borneo, we had all sorts of horrors at anchor, squalls, lots of motoring against current. And so when we did eventually, we hired a car actually for the first day, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. It was
hired a car and just drove. I mean, Tarakan's not big, it's probably only about 12 miles from top to toe. But
with one road.
Yes, literally one road that had been washed away by the rain. And everywhere we stopped, it was, hello mister, how's it going?
It is funny because they say hello mister to me as well.
Yeah.
I don't know the difference.
I think it reminded us of why we do this, and it is one of the highlights. But of course, people, when we think of people, it's not just the local people, it's also cruisers as well, expats.
Yeah.
Now, here's a question for you.
Yes.
Is it expat or should it be immigrant? British people, when they're abroad, call themselves expats.
Yes.
But when we talk about, say, Filipinos in Malaysia, we call them immigrants.
Well, I think that's the local usage of the word immigrant. To me, an immigrant is someone who gets the passport of the country to which they've moved. So when you talk about all those expats in Spain, in Europe, from the UK, they've still got British passports, they're still voting Brexit quite often, for some extraordinary reason, but they're still voting and they're still paying taxes, well, possibly. But anyway, I think the difference is the passport situation. But don't quote me on that, it's just what I've always thought.
No, I was just curious about that. You're probably right.
Yeah, so we've met local people, and we've met other yachties, and we've met all kinds of types of people. And I just wanted to explain why it's so important to make these connections. It's the stories that you hear, and a really good idea of what life is like in those places that you sail to. You spend all this time and effort sailing there, then you want to find out about them. So the first person that came to mind, he always comes top of the list, and I don't know why. Every time we get asked this question.
I know who it is.
Do you know?
Yeah. It's Selim.
Yes.
In
Aden.
In Aden, in Yemen. What an absolute delight this guy was. Yeah. He was supposedly a taxi driver.
Yeah.
But he never charged us for driving around.
He refused to take money.
Yeah.
He was jack of all trades. He knew everybody. His English was superb. Oh God, he took us around. Can I help you? Where do you want to go? And we'd say, what do you charge? No, nothing. No, it is I just want to take you and show you my country. God, he was lovely.
But you know what I think of the most when I think of Selim?
Crazy place?
Well, a crazy place. We'll talk about that in a moment, perhaps. No, it's his smile.
Yeah.
Every picture I took of him, great big beaming smile.
Yeah.
And I think he had as much fun taking us around as we did discovering these places around Aden.
Yeah, he took us to that place where we had the best lemonade. Was it lemonade that we'd ever had? Do you remember that little funny little place around the back, up a street somewhere, in a little tiny, about the size of this cockpit place, and it was just incredible. And lots of local people, he kept introducing us to people. A lot of people did speak English, which was quite nice. But I remember, so I'm going to tell you my biggest memory from him, and you weren't part of this. I was out with a couple of other yachties and we were shopping.
I should just say, by the way, we are not going to sit here and discuss all of our memories because I think that could be quite boring. We're going to talk a bit more about why we like these people, but this one is a particularly good example because I think I know this story.
It was very funny. We got chatting in the car. I mean, he was a non-stop talker, and it turned out he had studied in Russia some kind of engineering. And while he was in Russia, he got a bit of a flavour for the West. And also, while he was in Russia, he discovered ABBA. So, I mean, Two very odd things why she discovered ABBA. Obviously there's no ABBA in Yemen. So he discovered ABBA and completely fell in love with ABBA and Boney M. That was it. I mean, this was 2010, but he was living in ABBA times. He loved it. So there were three of us, three yachties, and we broke into Dancing Queen, which we all sang at the top of our voices with him driving and swerving around the road, all screaming this song at the top of our voices. And we'd stop and we'd open the doors and we'd all sing, "You are the dancing queen," to whoever happened to be passing by. That's my overriding memory.
Nothing to do with culture or history.
Just a lovely, happy man.
Well, the highlight for me, of course, was discovering Crazy Place, which is where they sell cat or gat, spelt Q-A-T. And if anyone knows, Yemen used to be, historically, was most famous for its coffee. Of course, you know, there's the town of Mocha, for example, that's in Yemen. And sadly, over the last generation or so, a lot of the coffee plantations have been replaced by cat or gat, which is an opioid. And it's legal in Yemen, and sadly a lot of mainly men are addicted to this opioid.
So it's branches with leaves
It's
on, and
literally
you
just
take
a
the
leaf.
leaves off and
You
stick
chew
in
it, and it's slow. It's a slow release thing, and in fact I think you start to get the effects after many days of chewing it.
Right.
And I remember the guy that we were sailing with said to us, if you want to get any work done, if you need to do any shopping, do it in the mornings. And we didn't understand why, because the shops were open all day. Well, sure enough, if you went into a shop after lunch, the shop owner with his friends was sitting behind the counter, half comatose.
Yeah, they were out of it. You couldn't do anything.
And it's just, I mean, culture, I'm just thinking of culturally, you know, it is a big part of its
Yes.
culture, and it was a real eye-opener. And Crazy Place was the market where they traded cats. All these 4x4 pickup trucks would turn up under this roofed marketplace, which anywhere else would have been selling fruit and vegetables. But yeah, they were selling cat.
It was extraordinary, and there were different grades.
Yeah.
Salim would have nothing to do with it, but he thought we should see it and understand it better. And the other thing in that market, do you remember there was a rifle, and you could shoot a rifle at
Oh,
a
that's right,
target?
yeah. But that's an example of meeting a local who was not bothered at all by what we thought of this, because it is legal, not illegal, it's legal. And it's a different side of a culture which perhaps you may not have seen if you had just been cruising around on your own. So it was very useful to have him there and to get his insight. And of course he knew a lot of the people there as well, so we were perfectly safe, not that we ever felt unsafe. But yeah, what an interesting character.
He was lovely, and my heart bleeds for what's happening in Yemen. I mean, it's completely changed. Terrible civil war, loss of life, and I have no idea what's become of Salim.
No.
So we always think of him
Yeah.
when we read about Yemen. Anyway, so he's like right at the top of our list of person we always remember, because there was something deep within him, within his soul, that was just joyful.
And we've met a few people like that in each of the
Yes.
countries. So in India we met Nazar,
Yeah.
who was officially, well, I say officially, he was known as the boat boy, although he was my age. And we got to know him very well, and he would bend over backwards to help us with getting things fixed on the boat. And I remember getting a pump serviced, which I was going to throw away, and he said, no, I know someone in he called it my town, didn't
My
no
country.
my country, which was his the Muslim quarters where he lived in Cochin. And he took this water pump to his friend to get fixed, because he knew that we could be overcharged elsewhere, and he didn't want us to be overcharged. And I think we ended up spending about £2 to get this thing fixed. But you know, we got invited into his family home.
Well, we got to know his whole family. We went to his daughter's wedding, didn't we?
Yeah.
And they all came over to see us at various times. And of course, the major thing was that he had a fabulous relationship with our cat Millie. And he looked after her whenever we went away, and she adored him. And he
Yeah.
would just pluck fish out for her. So, I mean, she thought he was God.
That's another example of where he lived. This Muslim quarter is a very small area within Fort Cochin itself, and again, it's perhaps somewhere that you probably would have missed, or maybe even have stuck your head round and seen all the shitting goats and chickens and thought, oh, I won't bother going in there.
I wouldn't have thought anyone would go in there.
But fascinating place. And this is when I was really getting into photography, and I spent days around that area just photographing, because it was truly insightful, and to have that local person there who, as I say, became a good friend.
Sorry for interrupting, but while I've got you here, if you like what we do and you want to support us and become a Patreon, or join us on FTB Mates, or even drop a quid in the rum fund, go to followtheboat.com/pub. Of course, come to the pub.
And of course there was your goat herder in India.
Oh yes, Cheladuri his name was, and this was in Tamil Nadu. We were driving around with a local driver who could translate for us, who actually spoke Tamil, and he explained to us how this goat herder came to have a bandage around his foot, which he'd acquired this injury while tending to goats on these mountains.
Quite steep mountains, lots of rubble everywhere.
Oh yeah, it was not the kind of place you would want to be working, quite extreme conditions. And this guy explained to us that he wasn't able to go to the hospital because he didn't have the money, because he had a son and a daughter who he had to pay to put food on the table for, which was very sad to hear. We gave him some money, I think, because I'd taken some really good photos of him as well.
Yes, on the wall.
And I don't normally give any money to people I take pictures of, but after he told us about, this injury, we felt bad. But then he shocked us through the translator, who explained that Cheladuri would like to know if we would like to adopt his son.
It was really quite shocking, and we didn't quite believe it to begin with. We wondered if he'd got the translation wrong. He said, no, he wants you to take his son away. And I immediately thought, he wants us to buy his son. But that wasn't the case at all. He didn't want us to buy him. He just wanted his son to have a better life. I don't think he'd ever met anyone like us before. And he thought, if I put my son with these people, he'll have a better life than he will with me.
And our translator had already explained to him that we lived on a boat, so he was quite prepared to allow I think his son was 9 or 10 years old, to go off with these two random strangers and go and live on a boat. And he was serious.
Oh, he was deadly serious, yeah. I mean, for about a split second we even thought about it. Is there some way we can help? Could we sort of, not necessarily formally adopt, but could we take a boy on the boat and teach him about sailing and give him good food? And I mean, we didn't, obviously, but it was shocking that someone was in that situation. I mean, to see it firsthand like that, one reads about this kind of thing, but to actually have it happen to you, so that was a memorable moment, and I think we have so many of those in every country. We could go on, but we won't do that anymore. What should we do next? What about the fact that we have met other cruisers as well? That's the other major thing. So the cruisers we've met that have become really good friends, who've given us lots of information, that we've swapped great times with. American springs to mind. Brendan, our Australian surfer, who gave us all that information about the Mentawai Islands and where to go and the best places. And we're still in touch with both of those guys all the time.
Lee and Jason, now back in Australia.
And then there was Pete and Jen, who we buddy boated with around the Anambas, and who they actually commented on the most recent podcast, didn't they?
They did. They've had a bit of a horrendous time. We were talking about, your fears at sea. They were doing a long passage with 1,000 miles to go to get to the Azores. They broke their pin on their steering rod, and they didn't have a spare. And ended up having to jury rig. They used an old socket set or something. Jen did explain in the comments, but horrifying. But Pete and Jen in particular, they were our age, and they had this sort of same outlook on life. And because I've always said that the cruising world is no different to living on a street. The one thing you have in common is where you live. If you're on a street, you live in the same street, but that doesn't mean to say that you get on with your neighbours.
There's lots of people that don't get on with their neighbours, and it's the same in cruising. Just because you're on a boat doesn't mean to say you're going to like each other. You can tolerate pretty much everybody and be polite, but to really, really get that
bond
connection.
It doesn't happen often.
No.
And so when it does, you really treasure those relationships, because of course eventually you know it will come to an end because you go off your own separate ways. Obviously you stay in touch, but quite often we say goodbye to people knowing that we will probably never see each other again.
That is where social media comes in helpful.
Yes.
Just before we finish this topic of people being the most important thing, there are one-offs, people you can't really categorise, and I would put Bobby in that category.
Bobby Pizza in Satoon, a Liverpudlian who moved over to Thailand many years ago, married a local girl, has children, and set up the best pizzeria in Thailand.
Yes.
And we frequented his place a lot when we were in Satoon doing our refit. And we had many a fun evening there, and Bobby is a real character.
Heart of gold.
Yes, great fun just to hang out with.
It's just so random discovering this quite broad Liverpudlian accent in the middle of this little back town in the southern Thailand. So unexpected.
Yeah.
But I think he was quite happy to hear our voices as well. It was quite nice for him to talk English for a bit. He speaks fluent Thai, and he's totally immersed in the society there, in the community. But he is great value.
Yeah.
Stay in touch with him as well.
Yes.
So going back to Jen and Pete, that was all about the things that can go wrong. So that was last week's, and we talked about it afterwards. And of course there were things that we've forgotten, weren't there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in podcast 016, which was worst experiences at sea, when we compared things that have actually happened to us to our fears. And I remembered, I had this blinding flash afterwards of probably, if not but top 3 worst things that's ever happened was in the Red Sea, when we lost power on the engine with a 2-knot current taking us towards land, not much wind at night.
And in my inexperience, we'd only been cruising for 2-3 years at that point. In a blind panic, I radioed through to one of the other boats. That was my first instinct. Yeah. There was one of the guys was very experienced, and I radioed through to him and said, "Our engine's cut out." And his reply was, "Well, what do you want me to do about it?" Which was the right response, because what could he do about it? I was just looking for some pointers and ideas, but eventually we found out it was actually the fan belt.
But it took quite a while to get there, and the experience was that I was in the cockpit, trying to hold Esper, just using the sails, from going anywhere, from basically trying to hold her in the same spot, just using the wind that we had and the current we had, while I could see the land, the big black shadow of land right next to us, absolutely, I'm going to say it, shitting myself, while you were down below struggling with the engine, trying to work it out.
I guess your fear must have been compounded by the fact you had a partner who didn't have a bloody clue what he was doing.
When it just stops like that, you ought to have a checklist of all the things to go through immediately, but we didn't. We were very inexperienced, but we got it. You got it. It was the fan belt and you had a spare.
Yes.
Yeah. God, that was terrifying.
Did you know we have a blog? followtheboat.com. Come over and have a look. It has all our podcasts, all our videos, and lots of other special bits, including a shop. Yes, we sell t-shirts, hats, all the usuals. It's really good clobber. So come along, have a look at followtheboat.com.
The other thing that happened on that journey was, and this wasn't necessarily the scariest thing that happened to us, but we were talking about boats that had been hit by other boats. Yeah. And we got T-boned by a fishing boat along the Indian coastline, but the fishing boat was commandeered by the Indian Navy. So they had 2 or 3 uniformed officers on board that fishing boat, plus the fishermen. And apparently they've been trying to radio through to us on a frequency I've never heard of before, not 16. And they'd actually just approached another couple that we knew who were over the horizon, and they said to us, "By the way, we've just been approached by the Indian Navy on a fishing boat. Watch out for them," because they were asking for booze.
As usual, yeah. Bribes, anything.
eventually they came down to us, and I happened to be down below. Anyway, I won't go into details, but they eventually ended up trying to come alongside us and hit us square on.
Yeah, because the waves are quite big. I was in the cockpit. You were down below looking for passports because they wanted to see passports, and that's when they hit when you were down below. And I think you came out. I don't think you touched the sides as you came out.
That is
Red with fury.
That is the most angry I have ever been in my entire life. I literally was seeing blood in my eyes. I was furious. And of course, these guys were trying to be polite and were asking for our documents and could they come aboard. And I
Absolutely no way.
absolutely point blank refused. I wasn't effing and jeffing, but I was shouting a lot. And eventually we did get a formal apology of
Yeah,
the Indian
I mean a
Navy.
year later.
Yes.
But we took lots of photos and they backed off then, and we got names and numbers and so forth, and we said we're going to report you, and they left us eventually. But that was a bit.
Never got compensated for it.
No, I mean they took out part of the guardrail, didn't
Yeah,
they?
they stanchion,
and the tow rail.
and the tow rail.
Really bad. But then
Yes.
of course the other thing that we didn't mention it is piracy. We didn't mention the fact that we've been through piracy. We've been through loads actually. So we recently, as everyone knows if they listened and watched our videos, through the east coast of Sabah, we had to have military escort because that's a dangerous area in southern Philippines that goes over to Sabah. So there was that. We've done that twice. Before that, we've been up and down the Malacca Strait many times, which people go, no, the Malacca Strait. There's nothing wrong with the Malacca Strait. It's absolutely fine.
If you're a cruiser, because a lot of the piracy that happens is, they're normally chances boarding anchored containers.
Yeah. It's
So-
not piracy.
So, well, it is
Well, it
piracy.
is, I suppose,
It
yeah.
is piracy.
It gets reported on the World Piracy Map.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about piracy down the Red Sea, and if you've missed it, actually, go back to series 1 of our podcast series,
Yes.
because we did talk a lot about piracy while we were in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, we document the whole thing, going through the Bab el Mandeb and round the coast. We have you can hear a piracy attack on the VHF. We're listening to it. We were told we had the Navy telling us to stay in Oman for a few weeks because it was far too dangerous to go out. It was all very dangerous. It was 2010, it was the worst year. And yet it never figures in my mind as something I worry about.
No, although I do remember having this general fear in the back of my mind for the whole journey.
At the time,
At the
yes.
time, yeah.
At the time, it was the unknown. We didn't know what to expect. We didn't know how it was going to work. And so, yes, we were worried. We were scared. But now, when I look back at it, piracy comes up time and again when people say, "But don't you worry about pirates." It's really funny that it comes so often in comments. Two things: eaten by a shark and pirates. It's people watch too many movies, I think.
Well, there were a couple of comments that sort of relate to that. There's one here by Jim Rowland who says, "Hi Liz and Jamie, thank you for the work you do on this. I have worked in professions where fear is a regular occurrence and many deny it. Anyone who says they are not scared is a liar or ignorant. Fear is a natural feeling. It tells us to be careful and watchful. We must not let fear control us, but we must listen to our fears." And he goes on to talk about how evolution has, that's how the human race has flourished, by listening to our fears and how to avoid them.
And acting on the adrenaline, so it's fight or flight. We know we have to do one or the other. We either have to get the hell out or we have to fight and stand up and do something about it.
Yeah, and Daniel Callinan comes up with an even more relevant, he says, "Love these discussions. As a risk management consultant, we do what Jamie was describing. We categorise risks based on their relative severity / impact and their frequency of occurrence. You then prioritise those that have both high severity and high frequency." And I just thought of these two comments because it does go back to the whole piracy thing and the fact that we looked at the situation, we assessed how risky it was. There was high risk, but we took every precaution we could to avoid it. And the main one being, of course, we travelled with 11 other boats in formation with regular contact. But piracy isn't something that happens to us every day. It's not a fear that happens every day, which is why it probably didn't figure in our top 5.
Yes, no, it doesn't. But just going on from what he said, I'm sorry, the name of the last one.
Daniel,
what he said was, you do all the risk analysis, but then it's your personal view on that risk and whether you're prepared to take it or not. Even though the risk is very high, you may decide, I'm going to give it a go. And that's something that you can't explain to people. We each have our own level of risk taking. I think probably cruisers take risks a lot more than other people because we're doing something dangerous anyway.
Do you agree, or maybe you disagree? Leave a comment for us on Twitter @followtheboat.
Can I just refer back to Yves Lemoine, who left this comment a couple of weeks ago, and I forgot to read it out because this one for me really stood out more than any other. And it was under our community poll that we did on biggest fears. And he said leaks, like a failed through hull or busted hose coupled with a failed bilge alarm. I'm totally paranoid about my boat sinking even after 7 years of ownership. It has diminished but not abated. It keeps me on my toes, but probably not in a good way. My boat is well maintained and the risk is very low, but I still find myself pulling the floorboards and checking every morning and evening, and often while under sail. It is while under sail that I'm the most nervous. It's what would keep me from doing an ocean passage the most, especially on someone else's boat. Now, the reason why this stood out was because I think Yves has been a bit hard on himself and making out that he's being paranoid, but his description of lifting the sole boards up to check the bilges, I do that all the time.
Yeah.
Literally, especially when sailing, almost every time I walk through to the forepeak, I lift up the central floorboards and have a look to see if there's water in there.
So it goes back to what I was saying about how much you're prepared to live with. It's still there and you're still scared, but you either live with it or you don't. And there's no right or wrong, it's what's right for you individually. And completely understand why he doesn't want to do it. And I think it changes throughout your life as well, because you are more risk averse now than you were when we started a few years ago, aren't you?
I think quite a few people mentioned this idea of taking fear by the horns and compartmentalising the fear and using that fear to be positive about the situations you're going to be in. There's a great one here from, I've got quite a few, I won't read them all, but there's a good one here from Sailing Yacht Salty Lass, who we can always rely on for some good comments, who says, worrying is what I do best. I'm an expert worrier. After 30 years in IT, trying to anticipate everything that can go wrong with a system, I have absorbed the process of worrying about everything into my DNA. On the plus side, it means that we have backup systems and mitigation in place for everything I can think of, and anything out of the ordinary, no matter how small, gets checked as soon as possible. They then go on to say, by the way, and I should have mentioned this, as for scary stuff, marinas and manoeuvring in them.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, lots and lots of big expensive things to hit. Sometimes with poor systems on pontoons or pontoons that you can fall through if you jump off the boat onto them. And toilets and showers that could give you any dozen medical issues.
Yeah, we've seen a few of those. Yeah, so...
Manoeuvring in...
Yeah, that's a good one.
And everyone knows I hate going into
Well,
marinas.
that was set in stone right from the beginning when we had a problem with our gearbox and we had so many things that happened crashing into things because it wouldn't engage, and oh my God. Yeah, so, and that's never left us really. I mean, she's a difficult boat to handle anyway. She doesn't manoeuvre easily in close spaces, but that added problem. I just won't touch doing anything like that. Yes. You always have to do all that. I don't mind running around the boat with ropes.
That's because you stop and chat to whoever is on the pontoon.
Yes, although there's always that first line you throw. There's always, oh God, please don't fumble it. Make sure you get it to the person.
Correction section.
Oh yeah?
Actually, just one, and this is from Sailing Someday. And by the way, I don't know who Sailing Someday's name is. I don't know if you've told us before, but they're commenting frequently. And in the last episode, I was talking about, and in fact, I think I do it in the up and coming episode.
Oh, I know what you're going to talk about. Big ships.
Yes, and I refer to them as containers. But what we're showing is, as he says or she says, a dry bulk carrier, which is having the coal moved onto it, and I refer to them as containers.
So you tend to talk talk about containers when you refer to any big ship.
So
do I. I mean, we're
any
both crap
commercial.
at that.
Yes, yes. He says the ship being loaded would be a dry bulk carrier. They carry dry cargo in bulk, loose in their hold. Examples would be coal, grains, iron ore, etc. Container ships generally only carry containers.
Okay, so he does go on to say you can use the generic term cargo ship, didn't he? In that, have you not?
Oh yes, I think so. But
Because I was thinking, what? So cargo ship, you can say that with abandon, and it covers a whole load of things.
yes, that's right. Well, ironically, I'd just read this comment and then I went back to editing the next episode, and there I was straight away talking about container ships in reference to dry bulk carriers.
Well, I'm sure you're going to do it again.
Here's one from Rodney. As an American who used to have a roommate from Essex, which is where I'm from, I used to have such a hard time understanding him, especially when he was excited or angry about something. Do you try to minimise your accent for the videos, considering you have many American viewers?
I don't think your accent's very strong. There are strong accents from Essex where you don't really pronounce it, it's kind
Well,
of...
when you talk like Essex, but it's talking a bit like that, you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
That's a bit more Essex.
Yeah.
I think I said to Rodney, my Essex accent probably comes out a bit more when I'm talking to my mates back at home. But no, I speak the Queen's English, Rodney. What are you talking about?
I can understand you.
I can't understand myself half the time.
Thanks everybody. Fantastic response. So many stories. Way too many to read out. And we're already getting responses for the latest episode 301 about the beautiful people. Although it's not getting as many hits as we normally do. Like every time we put out one of our favourite episodes, it just doesn't seem to be very popular. I don't know why.
I think it's because our favourite episodes are quite often about the inland travel,
Yes.
the sightseeing, could be diving and not sailing.
Yes.
I'd like to think that's what it is, because most people are invested in our channel because we live on a boat. But as we say countless times, we are as much about travel as we are sailing.
Yeah.
And as you say, this whole discussion today has been about the people that we meet.
Yes, exactly.
And it is one of the things we get most excited about. And the feedback that we do get from these episodes, these more travel related episodes, is always super positive.
Yes, it's really interesting as well, and it gets people talking about their own experiences, which I always love to read, and they're always very interesting. So I was looking this morning thinking, how can I get the views up on this? And then just a slightly change. I was thinking, actually I don't care, because we're putting out things that interest us, and we still will continue to do that, I think.
It's a shame though, because I think that there's a benefit to watching these kind of travel videos, because it is giving you an insight into a people and a place that, well, let's face it, Tarakan isn't exactly on the tourist map, is it? It's a port of entry off the east coast of Borneo, off Kalimantan, and not somewhere that certainly foreign tourists would go to. Perhaps
Nobody would go.
Perhaps local Indonesian tourists might pass through there, but and yet when you lift the cover up, there's a gem. I mean, how about that entire community on the beach farming the seaweed?
I know. Never even seen a documentary on that.
That I found fascinating.
Yeah. We saw how they did it, what they do, the different roles it played. I was staggered that it didn't stink. It didn't smell at all. It had a peculiar smell of its own, but it wasn't too bad. And you could see the different ways that it was changing the stuff. You could see them bringing it out of the sea. Do you remember the guys carrying it in those great big containers? It's just going on. Life just going on there, as it always has done.
And in among it all, you had, do you remember the little girl in the yellow outfit walking on the stilts?
She made them out of cans, didn't she? Paint cans. And a number of people commented on that, including your mum.
It was my mum's favourite bit. Yeah. My mum, by the way, I have to say, is one of our most ardent, biggest supporters. She loves, and bless her, she's always sends me a private message, because Mum gets to see the videos before everyone else. There's a special treat. And she commented on the girl on the stilts, and I replied to her saying that was my favourite bit, because in among all this industry that's happening with the grown-ups, you've got all the kids just doing with what they had around them,
And just being kids like they
Yeah.
are in the whole of the world.
Yeah.
Children will always find a way to play. Yeah, it was great. I'd love to go back there, but we'll find more like that.
I hope so. Yes.
Right, well, I'm going to wrap this up now.
Oh, are you?
I think we've been yabbering on, unless you've got anything particularly that you want
Well,
to say.
you've
right
been
now.
yabbering on. I've been coming up with constructive and insightful comments.
Yes, well, enough of my yabbering, and we will finish in the time-honoured way with you telling us what you're going to do now.
That's a very good question. I just wonder if perhaps we might have to get the generator out again, because we've got this cloud cover. And much as I love